Just want to talk about the utilization of a certificate of breeding or registration paper, as many of our breeders recognize. Uh, Really, I want to talk about some of the important components of that registration paper. One being the certificate number, which in most cases always starts with a C, which means that's a purebred animal, but also could have other signification like an F for a first cross or S for a second cross, for example. But every animal is identified by that unique number, which we call the BBU certificate number. It's found in the upper right-hand corner of all your registration papers. Also, just below that, you'll note that also another important area there is the identification of that animal, which we utilize as the permanent ID, whether that's a tattoo or a brand, whether it's a fire brand or a freeze brand, and also the date of birth of that individual is also located in that same area. Probably also important is when we get into ownership and those kind of things, but it will tell you who the breeder of the animal is. If you move to your left of the certificate, tells us who the breeder of that calf is and who the current owner of that animal is. Becomes really important, especially in JVBA shows. If you drop down into the center where we get into the purchase date, specifically our youngsters that are showing these Beefmaster cattle in shows throughout the country, this purchase date is basically your ownership date. So if you've got an ownership deadline, you've got to make sure that that purchase date falls within that ownership deadline for those particular shows you have. If you move to the left of that, then you'll see the if we're going to name an animal, this is the appropriate place that we would put an official name on an animal, as opposed to the unique ID. Also, color is going to be signified here. Again, this is where we really count on you, the breeder, to make sure that you register these cattle based on the color that they actually are. If it's a dun, it needs to be a dun. If it's a red, it needs to be red. If it's a paint, it needs to be paint, for example. Status, as well as the DNA status, and also some of you will note that it's got a BT or the blood type number. That will only appear on older animals, as we no longer have blood typing as a service to the industry. So more important, there will have a DNA number or case number there. Will also indicate with a PV for parent verified, an SV for sire verified, or a DV for dam verified. And if it only just has a DNA number without a PV, DV, or SV, it just means that we have a DNA profile on file here at the office. I guess it could look above that just slightly. I did leave out the classification. There are some breeders that actually will have utilize the BBU program we call classification, and we will classify these animals based on their conformation and their underline and udder scoring. And we'll put a date on there when we actually put that classification on there. That is on a small percentage of our cattle, but those that utilize the service, we do signify it on this registration paper. And when we look at expected progeny differences, or EPDs, those are really a tool for you to help market your cattle within the Beefmaster Association, but also out in the industry where you're in competition with other breeds. We're probably have fewer EPDs listed than most breed associations. We keep ours somewhat simple. We have what I'll call production EPDs on the left-hand side, and we'll have body composition EPDs on the right-hand side. We'll start with the first of all, what is an EPD? Basically, it's a mathematical or numeric value that allows you to compare one animal to another animal within the same breed. It really cannot be used across breeds without some mathematical calculations, and we'll talk about that in another series. Obviously, we won't have time in this one. But it allows you to take two animals and compare their EPDs to each other. So we can use an example values here. Let's say that you're looking at a bull, and we'll look at the first EPD that you see present there for BW or birth weight. Let's say that one animal you're looking at has a +1 EPD, and another animal you're potentially going to use as a -1 EPD. It basically says that to compare those two, and we'll say they're bulls in this case, that the bull with a -1 EPD in general will have a sire calves that are 2 pounds lighter, be the 1 pound plus from the other bull, deviated from the -1 of the bull that you're considering buying for a low birth weight bull, will be 2 pound difference on the average set of cows. So if that set of cows averages 80 pound birth weight on their bull calves, this potential sire is a -1 birth weight EPD should sire calves on average 78 pounds. That's a very simple way to look at it, but that's really how we use EPDs. And they are really just to compare 1, 2, or 3 animals within a breed. That's the way they're supposed to be used. If you'll also look at the ACC located just below that, that's called the accuracy. And to me, accuracies are about as important as anything on this particular registration paper. It tells you how many individuals have gone into the calculation of that particular EPD, and it really gives you the repeatability level that EPD would have. For example, if it has an accuracy of 0.99, it means there's going to be very little change to that EPD, what we call PC, or possible change value. So a real high accuracy would be 0.90 or higher. We consider that high, and you would not see much deviation in that particular EPD. However, if you see a PE, that's basically the parental estimate, which means they've just taken the sire and the dam. You can average, add those together, divide by 2, and you get on average what this calf should be. Those are what we call low accuracy, 0.05 to 0.1. It means there's going to be a high possible change value. So instead of a -1, the possible change value says it could range from a +1 to a -3, for example. So the higher the accuracy, the lower the possible change value, and inversely, the lower the accuracy, the higher the possible change value. So young animals will have low accuracies and a higher possible change value, whereas older animals that have more progeny, more relatives in that calculation, are going to have a higher accuracy and therefore a smaller possible change value. Then you can kind of look across the page there, moving to weaning weight and yearling weight, probably 2 measures of growth that we're concerned about. If you're a breeder that's looking to sell all your calves at weaning weight is probably the most important trait that you're going to have there after birth weight. Weaning weight, you want as much fast early growth as you can, because you're going to weigh those calves at 205 days or close to that and sell those at the sale barn, or based on that weaning weight average. If you're one that's going to be retaining a lot of females in your herd, or you're retaining ownership of steer calves in the feedlot, then yearling weight might be important, because you're going to be selling total pounds in the end, so you may want to put more selection pressure on the yearling weight. Milk is one of those EPDs that is tied really to a sire's daughter's milking ability, and I've always had this conversation with students through the 20 years that I taught at the university level, that everyone always thinks that the higher the milk value, the better off you are. However, I caution you in using milk EPDs that you need to make sure you know your environment, what your resources are in terms of how much nutrition you can get to that cow, to kind of give you a better estimate of where that milk EPD needs to be. I probably think that people need to be in the middle, more moderate in terms of milk EPDs. Don't get on the extremes too low or extreme too high. Scrotal circumference is another one we can look at, probably important if you're producing bulls or you're looking at sire selection. Scrotal circumference is just an indication of early puberty in a bull's daughter progeny. Again, we want a positive. The higher the value there, the more we like that in terms of reproductive fertility. We'll move across to the ultrasound EPDs, or the body composition EPDs. These are relatively new to the Beefmaster Association, and we've show 4 of those EPDs there, one for ribeye area, one for intramuscular fat, one for rib fat, and one for rump fat. Probably the most consistently used that we'll see in our industry is for ribeye area and intramuscular fat. Those EPDs are a measure of what you would predict the carcass offspring to have. So for example, a ribeye area, let's say you've got a plus 0.1 EPD for ribeye area, and another bull that has a plus 0.2 ribeye area EPD. Basically says that there's a 0.1 square inch difference on average for ribeye size if you use that one bull over the other one. So think of these in terms of square inches of difference. And obviously a 0.1 square inch difference is not very much difference. However, that is a highly heritable trait, and we can make progress quickly, even at that low level of 0.1% as an example I gave you. Likewise on percent intramuscular fat, those are in percent ether extractable fat values. Normally we think in terms of 1% to 10%. So if we've got a EPD of 0.1 versus a minus 0.1, again that's a difference of 0.2% difference, which again is very low. But again, this is what we call a moderately heritable trait. If we select for animals with higher EPDs for that trait, we can make progress relatively fast. Now the other two body composition EPDs, rib fat and rump fat, are a little more challenging to use. This is where I always try to tell students to think in moderation. Probably in the middle is always better. You don't want to be on the negative side of your fat depots, because that means you've probably got harder doing cattle. It's going to take more nutrition to keep them going in a production environment. However, if you get them too much on the plus side of that EPD, then you've probably got cattle that are too fat, that are probably not going to be fitting the conformation that you or the industry wants in terms of carcass attributes, and really even in final milking ability when you think of terms of early fat deposition in an udder and how that can negatively impact milk production in the end. So I always tell people that probably staying with your breed average, if that's 0 or if that's 0.05, you kind of want to stay in the breed average for those two particular traits. All right, when we're on talking about these EPDs, and you'll look in sale catalogs, and sometimes there will be an animal that's there that just does not have any kind of value there whatsoever. Basically what happens is we have to build upon the pedigree and data collection within those. If an individual, let's take a cow for example, if she has produced a calf and she did not have a weaning weight of her own, then basically it's not going to show an EPD there for her calf, because she did not have a performance record for that trait, so we have no way to calculate the EPD for it. So probably the best thing that you can do if you want to have EPDs generated, you've got to make sure that you actually capture those data points for the individual plus all of their progeny. You can't just do it on progeny. Eventually you can get enough progeny and you will get those EPDs developed, but it takes them producing progeny before you actually get them backed into it. So individual data point for each trait is very important, so that we can actually estimate an EPD for each individual trait there. All right, the next category is called individual performance records, and I always like people to think in terms of the most helpful information you have on this registration paper in terms of selection differences for genetic makeup is the EPDs. However, if you want a tool to help you confirm those EPDs, then you can drop down and use individual performance records. And note that we always adjust those to an endpoint. For example, we're going to adjust weaning weight to 205 days of age. Birth weight we're going to adjust to based on the age of the dam that actually produced that calf. So we make some adjustments to those so that it's a fair comparison from one calf to another calf from a breed association. But again, if you had priorities, I would like you to use EPDs first, and then we can fall back to these individual performance records. And actually, I would rather you use ratios as your next tool based on these adjusted traits. So in this case here, on our registration papers, you'll notice that we've got a ratio for, we'll use weaning weight as the trait in this case. We've got a ratio, we've got a contemporary group number, and we've got adjusted trait. So I'll just give you some examples. Let's say that in this particular calf we had a weaning weight ratio of 98. There were 7 contemporaries, and the adjusted trait was 556 pounds, 556 pounds. Would just mean that your calf was 2% below the average of that contemporary group of 7 animals. So what happens is we take the adjusted weaning weight of all 7 calves in that contemporary group and divide those by 7, add them up, divide by 7, that'll give you an average weaning weight for that contemporary group. We take that individual's adjusted weight divided by the average of the group, and you would come up with this ratio of 98. Obviously for weaning weight and yearling weight, you would want that to be above 100. Would mean that that individual is better than the average of its contemporaries. And that's really what you want to select for. Same thing for scrotal, ribeye area, percent fat, likewise. Again, make sure that you understand that these adjusted traits are adjusted for age of dam. They're adjusted for, in this case, a weaning weight 205 days. For yearling weight, we adjust those to 365 days of age. Ribeye area, percent intramuscular fat, scrotal, we adjust those to 365 days of age as well. The other thing that's probably important is the larger the contemporary group. Let's say that I've given this example of 7. If you've got 50 in a contemporary group versus 7, those ratios have much more impact than say if you had 1 in the contemporary group. So they tell you a little more of the story, the higher the number of contemporaries that you have in that particular animal's performance. We'll talk about what the information is really telling you on a pedigree for each animal, and I'll just pick a sire in this case here. The sire is going to start off with, could be asterisk, which will state pace setter, type setter status for that individual, would be located there, followed by the individual's name, its identification, permanent ID, where that is located, left ear, right ear, etc. And then that would be followed with the certificate number of that individual, and then a DNA case number if that animal has been DNA'd. Below that line for the same individual would also show the breeder of that animal, its classification status, whether it's U classified, and even its numerical classification, say a 1-2 for example. It will also give the date that the animal was classified, and it will also give its DNA status, whether that's blood type or DNA. Would also give us where it's parent verified, sire verified, or dam verified, or none of the above, just on profile. And that would do that across every individual in that pedigree. Okay, and each one of these are unique individuals, so not every individual will have every data point that I've indicated in the sire. May or may not have all those, because they may not all be top setters, pace setters. They may not all have been classified, but they will all at least have their name, their identification location, their certificate number on every case. Okay, if we look at the lower portion of the production records, really is an indication of total numbers of observations submitted for the sire and or dam in this case here. And we'll use the sire as an example. This will be the total number of records submitted for birth weight, for example. And notice that it will always typically be higher than the number of records shown above it that's used in the calculation. That is because it's not always the case that we're able to utilize all of the animals' data points in that evaluation, because they may have fallen out because of age, for example. In our weaning weight traits, they have to be taken between 140 and 270 days of age. If they fall outside that window, then we cannot use them in the genetic evaluation, even though we still accept that data point. We put it into the database, but we do not utilize it in our genetic evaluation. For yearling weight, they've got to be between 320 and 430 days of age, and all ultrasound data must be collected between 320 and 550 days for those individuals. So what happens is if they're not collected in that proper time frame, then they do not go in our genetic evaluation, although we still show that that data point has been collected. The back of a registration paper really is important in terms of office management. When you sell an individual and you need to transfer those registration papers to the new buyer, whether that's a current member, a future member, or even someone's just a commercial breeder that's never going to be a member, we want those papers transferred to that new buyer in every case. Very self-explanatory if you look at the back of the registration paper. Obviously very important is the date of sale, the buyer's information. We'd like to have their BBU membership number if they have it. If not, make sure we at least get the buyer's number, the address, telephone number, are going to be very important, and please make it legible so we can see it. An email address would be very nice too if we could get that. Make sure you, the seller, will include your certificate, your BBU membership number. Make sure you print your name clearly and sign it. We have to have your signature to actually transfer these animals. Also located below the seller's signature is also very important information, especially if you're selling females. If, for example, you sell a female that was exposed to a particular sire or sires, it located there will, one, give you the opportunity to give us the certificate numbers of the potential sires of this cow that may have been exposed, for example, or if you AI'd that cow, you can give us the AI sire, and also the date in which you bred that cow, or even the pasture exposure when that cow may have been running with a said bull or said bulls. Very important to get this completed. Also, at the very bottom of that, you need to make sure you check off of who's going to get that new certificate, what's going to be sent back to you, the seller, or if you want us to forward it on to the new owner of the animal or the buyer, and we'll make sure it gets in the right hands. Hopefully this has been a easy tool for you to understand the mechanism of our BBU certification certificate that you receive in the mail, or you may be transferring to another buyer member. Again, I think that there's a lot of information on there that can be misused, but if you follow the simple guidelines that I gave you, the information is very, very helpful, tells a very good story for you, for that individual, to help you make either one, breeding decisions, or two, to make buying decisions based off the information that we have within that pedigree. If you still have questions or concerns, feel free to contact the BBU office in San Antonio at 210-732-3132, or contact the field service representatives. Each one of us have cell phone numbers. You can sure contact us, and we'll be willing to help you out with any problems you might have.